considering your background and experience, and now you're starting upscale. And so I'm sure you put a lot of thought into this in terms of the vision you have for your startup, the culture that you want to build, and the values that are driving you. So I'm curious if you'd be willing to share
Hmm.
that right now as you
Yes.
build your own company.
And I did take my own medicine on this. So I have done this work. I did my own work around deep work around values and my purpose around about 4 years ago. And then I came back and did it again about 6 months ago as I was thinking and planning about starting my own business. And for me, my purpose is very simply about making people's lives better so they can reach their full potential by helping to remove some of the barriers that are getting in the way. And so, how that plays out with upscale is the part I play in helping to grow, scale, and be the absolute brightest they can be by removing what I would call the human barriers to really growing, scaling, and winning in that space. And I say that because, in my experience, 9 out of 10 growth issues, when you dig underneath, they're actually human issues. And so, my values, the way they show up, is it's such an interesting question. So, I've got a tagline for upscale that says grit, grace, growth. And that's not just about some of the principles I apply in the work that I do. It also is the 3 pillars of my values. So grit for me is about some of the stuff I touched on earlier. Your voice being heard, showing up and asking the difficult questions, which is very relevant when you're working with founders because you're often asking the curious and difficult and challenging questions. So coming with that kind of what I would call almost that harder performance edge, which is very much needed in this role. You can't just be all soft and fluffy. You need to come with that edge, which is about how are you going to drive and help this business get into a kind of growth and performance space. The grace bit is about at the same time, you can't just do all grit because that's like a horrible person to work with, and it would be a horrible organization to go and join if it's nothing but that hard edge. So grace is about the balance to that. And that's about showing up with the compassion, the care, being prepared to go first and be vulnerable so that others follow. It's about understanding that humans make mistakes. And that's a very normal part of being human. And just understanding a lot of those human dynamics. So within an organization or working with a founder, how grace shows up is alongside driving that hard edge of performance, how are you building a sense of belonging? How are you building belief in the vision so that through those highs and lows, that roller coaster of startup life, you are really taking your people with you. And also at the same time, you don't want an organization that's all grace and no grit. That doesn't work either. Nothing gets done. Performance is not something that's a focus, and therefore the business doesn't work. So for me, and for the way I approach my business and the work I do, it's about bringing the grit, bringing the grace, and bringing the growth. And the growth for me is that continuous learning. Like I was listening to someone today, this morning, on another podcast, and they were saying that they're such a geek because they're constantly listening to podcasts. And that's me. I'm always looking to learn. I don't ever feel like I have all the answers. So I'm never working with a client and going, I have it all figured out. I can tell you exactly what to do and it will work. That isn't the case. Sometimes it's about figuring stuff out together and really putting that effort into the job is never done. We're always a work in progress. No one's ever perfect. What's the work that you are going to do? The responsibility you take to continue with your self-improvement. So grit, grace, growth is very much how my own values show up with that bigger purpose of really helping businesses become the vision that founder has in the real world. And it's no small feat. But I think if you can really get to grips with the people and culture side, so many other things start to unlock themselves.
Yeah, I think we've kind of brought it full circle, and I love how your value there's diversity in your values, and you kind of talked about that in hiring, diversity of thinking styles and
Mhm.
personalities. So I like it. I like how it's kind of all tied together. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be on, and I'll give you the floor to close if you want to add any final thoughts. So obviously you help startups with people problems, but maybe if you can clarify if there are specific sizes or types of businesses that you focus on, and where
Yeah,
people can find you if they want to, reach out and learn more.
sure. So typically, I mean, it's not exclusively, I do have clients at either ends of the spectrum, but typically the spot that I love and I particularly love being involved in is where the business is maybe getting to around about 50 to 60 people plus. And they're thinking about, okay, we're on the trajectory to get to and it's me helping them avoid some of the most common pitfalls that are entirely avoidable. And then when you get beyond the 100, how do you really shape your organization to be nimble and scalable so you can actually grow at pace? Because that's another big trick. That's really challenging to do if you're a founder and you haven't done that before. So that's typically the kind of size of business. It's often kind of post seed heading through to Series A, Series B, and beyond. And then how people find me. So I am upscaled. Actually, upscale is up dash scale. And you can find me as Caroline MacGregor on LinkedIn as well. That's the other great way of finding me. And I think the one other thing I would add, Connor, is that there's a question that goes around in my mind in terms of thinking how I really help businesses and help the economies to flourish, which is that there's such a tiny, tiny percentage of successful female founders and a tiny percentage of female founders that get funding at Series A. They may get funding at seed stage, but find it very challenging to get funding at Series A. And so I have a question in my mind around why is that really? I mean, there's been lots written about it. I don't fully understand it yet myself. And I'd like to be part of helping figure that out. And I think also another thing is around AI and how AI will be able to help founders in the future to short circuit some of these challenges and to be able to help with ideation